Joel and Tracy are cleaning up. Boy, thanks for your patience last week. It's been warm in here. It feels better this week, doesn't it? We found out that Dan found a breaker had tripped. And so it had been tripped for a while, so we weren't getting AC in here for a while, but he looked at that and resolved it. And I think we're thanks for your patience and sweating through the last week especially was hot. We're walking down the path of righteousness. And that's where we're walking these days, and what we're finding is the path is becoming practical. It moves from what we need to know to what we need to do, from vertical to horizontal. That's what we find as we walk on the path. Look what it says in 2 Peter 1, verses 3 through 6. It's in the worship folder. There's a sheet there with some verses written. 2 Peter 1, verses 3 through 6. It says that His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. Through these He has given us His very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control. You ever play a bad piano? You know, like an old piano that you don't know, and ding, 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 donk. And it has the bad key. The addition that Peter makes in this list of virtues would sound like a bad key to somebody who would have lived at that time. Things made sense up until that point. Goodness was a virtue and was a common notion if you were a Greek. A Greco-Roman culture, they knew all about goodness. It really meant virtue. And they had 4 cardinal virtues: self-control, courage, wisdom, and justice. And so they were all about goodness and virtue. Knowledge was highly esteemed as well. They valued knowledge. And when you look back at those times, it was just like an explosion of knowledge because of the Roman Empire and the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, and the highway system. There was a lot of culture, a lot of knowledge that was attained. They understood knowledge. Self-control, again, was one of the 4 cardinal virtues. They highly esteemed it. And interestingly then, it takes a path. The path takes a sharp turn and goes in an unexpected direction. If we were in the culture at the time and we heard self-control, we would expect to hear justice. And to your self-control, add justice. Or to your self-control, add courage. Or to your self-control, add wisdom. That would make sense. That would be like a piano that was tuned. But the fact that it says, and to your self-control, add perseverance. Perseverance and endurance were not cardinal virtues. They weren't highly esteemed. The thought that man could not do anything he set his mind to do was foreign to the Greco-Roman Empire. They were able to do just about everything they wanted to do. And as far as Christianity is concerned, God gives grace to the humble was a really difficult thing in the Bible that was hard for them to get their arms around. Now, when they read it, it's one of those things that they read quick through, that God gives you humble. Let's get on to the good stuff. That's the thing they couldn't really embrace, because humility was reflective of something they really didn't have a lot of aspiration for. Humility was the experience of a slave. And we think of humility, we think of somebody self-effacing. Oh, it wasn't me. No. Humility in that time didn't mean that. It was the experience of a slave. It was the inability to leverage what you had to get what you want. So if you were a slave, you lacked the political leverage to be able to get justice in the courts. If your master beat you up and you had no advocates in the court, you had no means whereby to turn the hands of justice towards you. You were powerless. You had no financial leverage. In fact, a lot of them were sold into slavery either because they were conquered or because they were indebted. And so they had no political leverage, no material leverage. They had no social leverage. Some slaves were esteemed, but not so that they could get their master to do anything the master didn't want to do. So the idea of humility found in the Bible was marginalized by Greek culture. I mean, who wants to be a slave? And that's why they had a difficult time with that. Here's where the Bible departs from cultural confines. The broad road goes in one direction. Self-control, courage, wisdom, justice, which are okay things. But the Bible goes in a different direction. It goes into self-control, perseverance. Perseverance. Greco-Roman culture emphasized self-control, de-emphasized perseverance. The Bible flips that. The Bible de-emphasizes self-control. In fact, that word is only found 3 times in the Old Testament, which is the Bible that they had at the time. New Testament was written about the 4th century. It was compiled by letters written prior to that time, so their Bible was the Old Testament, the first 39 books. And in the Greek version of that Bible, self-control is found 3 times in the wisdom literature, Psalms and Proverbs, that's it. But perseverance is a thread that is woven through the fabric of the Old Testament. It's everywhere in the Bible. It's just it's a flip. While self-control was not a cardinal virtue in the Bible, perseverance most certainly is. It's a thread woven into it. Biblical perseverance is not passive resignation. It's not, okay, I can't do it. It's not like a slave. A slave had no recourse but to do what they were told. That's not biblical perseverance. Biblical perseverance is something that happens within the framework of a covenant relationship. If I tell you, I am going to come, and if you're in a situation where you are being oppressed or you are not having a nice day, you can comfort yourself with the fact, okay, Mike said that he's going to come. That's not passive resignation. It is anxious waiting for something to occur. That's what biblical perseverance is. It's a God who keeps his covenant saying, I will never leave you or forsake you. And being in positions where you feel left and forsaken, but you hold on to hope because you know that God's going to show up. That's biblical perseverance. The passage that we look at, again, in this passage, it is an appeal to try to make Christianity relevant to somebody in that culture. And again, here's where the road departs. But it's also a time-lapse look at how faith blooms into love. Paul says the only thing that matters is faith expressing itself through love. That's all that matters. And what we find in a time lapse, you know the way time lapse works. It's little snapshots that give you something from faith, goodness, knowledge, self-control, perseverance, godliness, kindness, and you end up at love. Time lapse. Boom, boom, boom. That's the way Peter describes it as working. How faith blooms into love. And there seems to be some missing links. We had a discussion the other day. Somebody was talking about, it's kind of a shot, Christian Business Directory. It's not always a place to go to if you want a good deal. Many of the people on the Christian Business Directory would not make it to Angie's List. What's missing? What's missing? They're missing links. Faith in Christ is intended to lead through self-control and perseverance to kindness, love. And it doesn't always do that. There are some missing links. We're going to find several of them. Look in the Bible. It talks from Matthew 13. Matthew 13, 20 through 22. What it says, the one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. As we've been saying, you don't need to walk on the path of righteousness to become knowledgeable, self-controlled, persevering, and kind. You don't need to walk on the path of righteousness. There's a lot of people who are self-controlled, kind, persevering, who love. The problem is, that is the deal. It's self-control that ends up at love and not at selfishness. It's knowledge that ends up at love. It's kindness that ends up in a sacrificial giving. That doesn't always happen, does it? And the missing links seem to be self-control and perseverance. Again, there are the vertical things and the horizontal things. Godliness, kindness, love. The thing at the juncture of vertical and horizontal, the links, the transaxle, are self-control and perseverance. And when those are missing, you get this, but no this. Or you get this, but no this. You get faith, but no love. Or love, but no faith. What connects these two? Self-control and perseverance. Self-control and perseverance come from faith and leads to love. Faith that results in fruit, when Jesus tells this parable, has to manage pleasure attraction. And again, we all are attracted to pleasure, but what it says is that can choke the word. So God puts a seed inside, and the seed can bear fruit. What's fruit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. What in the world will cause that soil to be able to produce that fruit? And Jesus goes in to talk about bad soil, the kind of soil that will not produce fruit. And he says the kind of soil that ends up not producing fruit is thorny soil. And what we talked about are thorns. They choke, but not this way. They suffocate. It's like they take all the available resources of the ground. They're very aggressive. And so if you plant something that you want to come up, something you don't want to come up will come up because it's very aggressive. That's the way worries, riches, and pleasures are. Now, the things that we have to deal with, but left unmanaged, it crowds everything out until the only thing you really can think about are worries, riches, and pleasures. Worries, riches, and pleasures. And we get up in the morning. What will benefit me? What will make me money? What will give me pleasure? We go to bed at night. What will benefit me? What will make me money? What will give me pleasure? And it's not like we're conjuring these things in our mind. It's that they're like orcs. They jump over the walls, and there's so many of them, and you try to give them, and you end up giving up. That self-control is needed because of that, to manage pleasure attraction. Faith results in fruit, though, must also manage pain aversion. Pleasure attraction needs to be managed. So does pain aversion. Okay, how many of us love pain? Come on, get them up there. How many sadistic people are there here? Masochistic people. Anybody? Any? No. We have an aversion to pain. The fact is, sometimes we end up in painful places. And nobody likes a painful place. But some of us don't just not like painful places. Nope, not going there. Nope, not going there. Nope. And we limit our life relative to, we don't want to go near it. The fact is, the path to righteousness passes through painful places. That's not optional. That's not really good news. I'm not going to stand up here and jump up and down, but it is a truth. The path to righteousness is going to lead through painful places. It's not optional. So if you're going to walk that path, it's not going to be cloud nine. Not going to be. God will not always give you what you want. He's not invested in your tension relief. Or mine. You're going to go through things where you're going to have what you don't want. And you're going to try everything you can to exert influence on yourself or on your environment to bring everything into line, and it's not going to work. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to do what I do. You're going to hide the fact that it doesn't work. How are things? Great. Great. Wonderful. I'm a Christian. Didn't you know that? Don't you think I go to church? Don't you think I pray? Or we hide or hurl. How are things? Oh, boy, I tell you, if you had this, if you worked at this, if you had that kind of, then we hurl. Or we huddle. We get together with others, and we just gossip. Things like that. Faith result in fruit must manage pain aversion. It says in the passage, but since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. The straw that breaks the camel's back has to do with pain experienced because of the word. Somehow, in the context, what he says, there's these individuals that are orienting themselves biblically, whatever that means, and that will have implications. And they come up to a pain because of doing that, and then they get up to the pain, they go, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for the I worship God and he gives me everything I want package. Where's that line? I got in the wrong line. I got in this line where I'm running into things that are not pleasurable, and this is not what I signed up for. I signed up for I give him $1,000, he gives me $10,000. I signed up for that God. And when trouble comes because of the word, then it's like, oh, that's it. Jeez, I'm out. And what he says, that's soil that's not going to bear fruit. Because the fact is, the path to righteousness is going to go through painful places. It is. And nobody likes this. But it's the truth. See, the reason why to say the truth is when we go through painful places, we think we did something wrong. See, that's the problem. It's hard enough to manage the load of difficulty without having to manage the load of guilt. You understand what I mean? It's like you go to somebody and say, boy, I'll tell you what, I'm really struggling. And some Christians are saying, well, you should pray more. Thank you very much. I came in with one load and I'm leaving with two. Don't tell me anything. It's much better to hear, you know what? I get that. You're not alone. We go, okay, that doesn't feel, I still wish I didn't have pain, but at least I don't have guilt. Do you understand what I mean? Pain's hard enough in and of itself. That's right. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. He becomes offended and gives up believing. The road to spiritual maturity passes through difficulties, and trials are not optional. What it says in James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. That's a challenge, isn't it? How things? They're terrible. They're just awful. I'm just giddy with joy. Let me tell you about all the things that are going wrong in my life. I mean, do you have time for this? This is great. I think we might need to get some help for this. With the sadistic, masochistic, consider it all joy, but it says it's not to stop there. What it indicates is what happens when you're on that road. It says, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Same word that we find in the missing links. Self-control, perseverance. And I want you to look at, listen to what it says about perseverance and the role of perseverance in maturity. I want you to listen. Listen to what it says. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. What is it that will enable us to be mature and complete, not lacking anything? Perseverance. And if that's one of the missing links, what's going to happen? Immaturity. Lacking a lot of stuff. God will expose us to things because the testing of our faith develops perseverance. Perseverance, once and as it is online, is that tool that God uses to fashion us into being the men and women he wants us to be. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. I guess there's no substitute for trials. When you walk with God, you will come to places on the roads where you'll do the daisy thing. You'll look around at your life and say, he loves me not. He loves me not. I've got a great job, he loves me. I got a demotion, he loves me not. Got a great retirement, he loves me. It's going for medical care, he loves me not. I've got a nice family, he loves me. But my kids aren't, he loves me not. He loves me not. You'll have those things. You'll have proof of both. Why? Because that's what happens on the path of righteousness. You'll be exposed to things that you don't want. on the path of righteousness, you will experience things you do not want to experience. And you will exert your influence to try to change it, and you will be ineffective. Or you claim to be effective, but you'll be a hypocrite. Or you will blame others and be a judge. The fact is, really where it comes from, do you know why we have problems? Because me doesn't like it when me doesn't get what me wants. Again, I'm not pointing the big bony finger. Me doesn't like it when me doesn't get what me wants. I find somebody to blame. I pretend. There's no substitute for trials. Faith is tested when we're exposed to trials. Faith that survives in spite of wilderness experiences is authentic. Faith that survives in wilderness experiences is authentic, and faith that doesn't is inauthentic. Again, we're going to talk about where to find perseverance. All I'm establishing is critical, essential, seminal, primal. A Christian is certified as such in the wilderness. Someone who asks Christ into their life receives Christ, which is not the biblical word for a Christian. When you look for the biblical word for how you become a Christian, receive is not the word. Remain is the word. Remain is the word. That's what a Christian is, one who remains. Or to receive is to receive Christ as a rabbi, not to receive him. Again, I remember praying to ask Christ into my life. Some of us remember that. And it was a point of transformation. But I've talked to some people. I was on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ, and I walked up to individuals and said, "Hi, I love reading this book called The Four Spiritual Laws." And I'd share the Four Spiritual Laws with people, and I'd sit down with you, and then we'd go through laws. And I said, "Do you want to pray and ask Jesus into your life? Do you want to pray and ask Jesus into your life?" And then people said, "Yes." Great, pray after me. Jesus, I need you. Jesus, I need you. I ask you to come into my life. I ask you to come into my life to be my Savior and Lord, to be my Savior and Lord. Take control of the throne of my life. Take control of the throne of my life. And you know what? Some of those people became Christians because they remained. Some didn't. You know why? I don't know why. What is a Christian? A Christian is somebody who remains. What about somebody who has Jesus in their life but never does anything with it? What would you say? Is a person a Christian? No, again, I'm not going to blow them up. I'll orient them or point them to the places where you need to look in order to have faith express itself through love. And you know what that is, don't you? Where do you have to look to develop faith? Oh, you know what that is, right? You have to look to yourself. Come on. Some of you need to become dedicated. Isn't it about time you got off the pot? You lived up to your commitments. Isn't it about time? How will that do? How will that do? That type of faith, the grind it out kind of faith, is that going to survive the wilderness? And if it does it lead to love? Absolutely not. Can't. The power to live the Christian life does not come as you focus on your dedication. How to live the Christian life? Well, what does Peter say? His divine power has given you everything you need for life and godliness through the true knowledge of him who called you by his glory and goodness. Where do you look for to get power? His glory and his goodness. His promises. But here's the deal. This is not just nice things to make us feel nice. You know, think about his glory and goodness, because if you're having a bad day, it will kind of take the chill off. It's something that his glory and goodness and his promises. I got an image of this. When I was in China, they walked around with SARS masks because they wanted to protect themselves from the infection that was happening. So every time you go into a place, people wearing SARS masks, and what occurred to me? That's what his glory and goodness is like. it's like this injection that you take to keep you from getting infected with something terrible. So his glory and goodness are not nice little things you sip on. They're powerful, powerful medicines that you put into your veins and you draw into yourself, because if you don't have a focus on his glory and goodness, you're not going to have the self-control that leads to love. Can't happen. The divine power channels through glory and goodness and promises. These are not nice things. Like, kids are irritating. Somebody talks about, focus on the promises. Let's focus on obedience. Don't get it. The kind of obedience that is going to be acceptable, faith that leads to love, is based on promises and glory and goodness. That's what the Bible says. Power to sustain us happens in the wilderness of wanting. Talk about where we find perseverance. Where do we find perseverance? What it says, although he was a son, Hebrews 5, 7 through 9, he learned obedience. You know who this is talking about? Jesus. Does it say what? He learned. Jesus learned obedience? You know what learned obedience mean? It's a similar word to persevere. To persevere means to remain under in a situation that you want to get out of, but you stay in that situation waiting for God to come to provide rescue. Persevere. It's not, okay, God's not going to come. It's, okay, I'm going to stay here because God's going to come at some point. That's to remain under. That's perseverance. The word for this word, obedience, it's related. It's to be under, but hearing. It's to be under, but to be hearing, to hear under. So it's somebody, when they're in this place, they orient themselves to what they heard, and it helps them to stay. That's where Jesus learned to tune in the Father when hunger was screaming at him from inside. Turned up the dial. He learned that from what he suffered. Learned that from what he suffered. Because that's where we learn these things, in the wilderness of wanting. The path to righteousness is going to lead through the wilderness, and that's not a fun place. It's a place where your stomach growls, where you're hungry for influence. You're hungry for meaning. You're hungry for significance. You're hungry for direction. You're hungry for companionship. You're hungry for success. You're hungry for things that are okay to be hungry for, but they're not coming. You try to influence yourself to meet the need. It's not getting met. You try to appeal to your wife, your husband, your mother, your father, your kids, your boss. Still not happening. Or if it happens for a day, then fades out. And you get to the place you don't even want to hope anymore. You just want to give up because it's hard to hope, dash. Hope, dash. But you know what that's like? The wilderness. The wilderness. That's what the wilderness is like. It's a place that you could be walking through the Judean wilderness, and it's barren. And all of a sudden, there's a wadi. And there's this water and trees, and it's like, this is great. But then the problem is that if you're following the cloud will stop at this place, but it doesn't stay there. And then it moves. And then within 1 or 2 days, there's nothing. And your water sources are being depleted. And you're getting hungry. And you're becoming frightened. That's what the wilderness is like, a place of extremes. But I don't have to tell you about that. You understand wilderness. You're in it, many of you, or have been, or will be. Things going well, things become frightening. I'm doing without, I'm conscious. This isn't the life I want. But boy, this feels better, but boy, this doesn't. How many of you can understand that type of experience? The rest of you are liars. Okay. Good. You won't have to look for trials and temptations. Jesus learned experience. Jesus learned perseverance. Perseverance produces usefulness. Go ahead, next slide. Perseverance produces usefulness. Jesus didn't suffer in order to become a son. Listen to what it says. Although he was a son. Now, he didn't need help understanding how to be a son. He didn't need to learn obedience in order to be a son. Although he was a son, he learned obedience. Do you remember what obedience means? It's remaining under and hearing. He learned obedience from what he suffered. And then it says, and once perfect, once the training was done, what did he become? The source of eternal salvation. Here's the deal. You don't need to walk on the path of righteousness and go through the wilderness to become a son or daughter of God. But to be a source for someone else, absolutely you do. Absolutely you do. You want to be used? You want to be used? You want to be useful? Serious question. And if you're on the path, he's going to want to make you useful. You are going to go through trials. And it's not going to be about you're a bad person and I'm going to give you this trial because you're so selfish and I'm going to take that selfishness away from you. It's about, in order for me to channel, God says, into and through you, you need to go through some things so that you can channel me. It's about not what will happen to you, but what will happen as he puts you in that place and things that can come through you. That's why you go through the wilderness. It's not to become a son or daughter, it's to become a source. And do we have to go through these things? If Jesus did to be a source, is it optional for you to be used? And if you're going to be used, are you going to go through difficult things? You sure? Not optional. Not optional. Would you agree with me? If we listed the things that are in the way of your happiness and the things that are in the way of your usefulness, these things are defects of character that stand in the way of happiness. These things are defects of character that stand in the way of usefulness. Are those the same lists? The things that stand in the way of happiness, do they stand in the way of usefulness? You can go through a difficult thing that makes you understand need. Does that make you happy? Does it make you useful? Because if I go through a thing where I am trying to figure out how to navigate through uncharted waters, if you can't understand that, you have nothing to say to me. But if you've been through things, I'm going to listen to you. So that thing that didn't make you happy makes you useful. Useful. It says in step 7 in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, my Creator, I'm willing that you should have all of me. This is a great prayer. I'm willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. What it says, you give your life to God. We tend to separate our life into lights and darks. There's the light thing, the nice things. And there's the dark load. And we like to separate into lights and darks. And we either give God the darks and keep the lights, because we kind of like to have the nice things with us, or we give God the nice things and keep the darks. Put it all in the same basket. All of it goes in one basket. But the prayer says, I'm willing that you should have all of me, good and bad, all mixed in together. I ask that you would remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my, what do you think it might say? Oh, it probably doesn't say that. It must say happiness. Remove every single defect of character that stands in the way of my, it says usefulness. Usefulness. You know what it is? Here's the basket. Would you take from this basket everything that stands in the way of usefulness and leave the things in here that contribute to it? It's a great prayer. If Jesus needed to suffer in order to learn, we're going to need to suffer as well. If we're going to be useful, we will enter the wilderness. Jesus' training included wilderness wanderings. I'm going to read this passage. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. You're looking at this passage, you're looking at the time and going, okay. Let me read it. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Tempter came to him and said, "If you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man does not live by bread on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city, had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you're the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, their glory. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Jesus was led into the wilderness right after his baptism. There's a water experience in which this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Water experiences, dramatic deliverances, healings. We have these things. Things like this happen. Water experiences, like the parting of the Red Sea. There I go, walking right in the middle of a sea. Dry, water on both sides. We've had some experiences like this where God parted waters. You know what the interesting thing is? Both for Israel and for Jesus, they walked through water experiences right into wilderness. Why can't we stay with the water experiences? Can I just kind of put up a condominium on the shore of the Red Sea? Just kick my feet up and just do it. Do you remember that? The wall of what it was just, boy, let's see the video again. I think somebody put that on their iPhone, and let's get that in. Boy, remember that? It was wonderful. It's been a good day. Yeah, we'll come back tomorrow. Let's sit on the porch and let's look at that video again. I can't get enough of it. But God does that. The cloud leaves, doesn't stay by the water, goes into the wilderness. Because why? Because you're bad and you have things that God needs to take from you. No, you're going to be used. You're going to be used. You can't sit on the borders of the Red Sea with your feet up. Not how it works. Not how Jesus. Yeah, anyway. Jesus was immersed in need and in hunger. And you know what happened to Jesus? Well, he had to tune in. How many of you, your stomach growls, it growls really loud? Oh, you're not going to lift your hand. Okay, how many have people next to them that is really, oh, go, there it is. Okay. 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 And what was happening? There were two voices. There was the voice of the Father. "You're my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." Where's the other voice coming from? You know, this. You know what this voice is saying? Empty promises don't put food in your stomach. He might have said he's with us, but I don't see a meal, do you? These things clash. That's what happens in the wilderness, is what he says and what you see. Faith puts its focus on what he says. It remains hearing, and that's how it can stay with a measure of hope. It tunes in. That's what Jesus did. And he was able to fend that off. You know the difference between Jesus and us? Well, let me tell you this. The one thing that all these temptations have in common, they all relieve tension. If you're hungry and you turn something into food, the physical tension is gone, right? You're not hungry anymore. But there's emotional tension. And if you throw yourself down and he rescues you, your emotional tension is gone. Or if you have everyone looking at you, your social tension is gone. You know what the devil tells him? Leverage your relationship with God to make him remove tension. Surely God's going to remove your tension, isn't he? Demand that he does. If you're the child, he's going to do that, isn't he? Isn't he? Isn't he? No, he isn't. You know what Jesus did? He said, no, I'm not. He said he's going to feed me. He's going to feed me. I'm going to hang in and wait for him. I'm going to wait for him. You know why Jesus could wait for him? It doesn't say it in the text. I know why. You know what he was thinking about? The glory of the Father, the goodness of the Father, the promises of the Father. tuning them in. And he was able to trust in them. If you're in a wilderness place, that's what you need to tune in. If you're going to wait and not have it be fine. Yeah, I can't do anything with God. He won't bend to my prayers. If you're going to have some type of, if you're going to be out of faith and lead toward love, you're going to have to zero in on glory, goodness, and promises. And it's got to be unconditional promises. Has to be. New covenant promises. Has to be. Perseverance endures tension. Jesus didn't leverage his relationship with the Father to eliminate tension. I'm just about done. He leveraged relationship with the Father to endure tension. Have you ever tried to do the 5 steps and they don't work? Is be real. Let me see. What was that? Be real, be still, breathe freely. I have to exhale my concerns, inhale his commitments. I'm still tense. Yeah, something's wrong. I'm not supposed to be tense. I'm supposed to be tension-free. So you take this thing and fix it, and then give it back to me. We don't do those things to eliminate tension. We do it to endure tension. To endure tension. To endure it. Some of you feel guilty because you're still tense. You're in the wilderness. And he's preparing you to be used. Of course you're tense. You haven't done anything wrong. In the path of righteousness. Couple things. Couple reasons why. I think we get in trouble. The worship team is going to come up. I think we get disconnected. We get disconnected from glory, goodness, and promises. We listen to things and we focus so much on commandments that we don't think about commitments. Commandments are not the things to focus on in the wilderness. Commitments are. Sometimes I think we get misdirected. It occurs to me, our culture is a lot like the culture of the Greeks and the Romans. We don't like humility. We live in the most powerful empire that's ever populated the planet. We don't do humility well. We do choice well. I want what I want, when I want it, how I want it, and I have the wherewithal to be able to make that happen. I'm not pointing a big bony finger at anyone. I am part of this culture too. But that's a tough thing because sometimes, would you agree with me? Affluence, as far as spirituality concerned, is a deficit. Captivity is an asset. The Bible makes sense if you're within the framework and era of captivity. For a Jew living under the Roman Empire, they understood captivity, and the Bible made sense. We read the Bible from within power. And again, I wonder if that's what happened to Christianity in the Roman Empire. That Christianity changes when it is put under the auspices of somebody that has a lot of power. The Bible breathes, again, what do we say to this? Let's be here, but know that you will go through difficult things. Perseverance endures tension. Perseverance endures tension. And it's the means whereby we become the people God wants us to be. Focus on his glory and goodness because his divine power is giving you those things so self-control and perseverance could lead to love. Let me pray. Father, thank you for your word and for your honesty. You tell us what to expect, understanding that it's a difficult thing, but when you're with us, it does create a comfort in the midst of a storm, understanding we're not alone. Continue to help us to understand your glory and goodness and promises. Help them be sharper in our mind, clearer, so our faith can be supplemented by goodness. And goodness can end up leading to knowledge and self-control and perseverance, through that to godliness, kindness, and love. For Jesus' sake, amen.